They had love, they had history, and they had secrets. But one fateful night, everything shattered, leaving behind a crime so brutal, it would haunt their children forever. How does a relationship filled with passion and pain spiral into such a brutal tragedy? What happens when love turns into control, and control turns into murder? Before we dive into this shocking case, like this video and subscribe for more chilling tales of love, lies, and betrayal. Taniyah Willis had always dreamed of something bigger. A better life for herself. A stable future for her 2 children. A way out of the struggles she had known since childhood. She wasn't raised with much, but she had a fire inside her, a determination to rise above her circumstances. She worked long hours as a cashier at a grocery store, barely making enough to cover rent and daycare, but she refused to give up on her dream of becoming a nurse. If she could just get ahead, if she could just catch a break, she knew she could build the life she had always envisioned. Then came Jevonte Maddox. Jevonte, or J-Rock, as he was known in the streets, was everything Taniyah had been taught to avoid. He had charm, confidence, and a way with words that made it easy to forget the warning signs. His past was checkered with trouble, run-ins with the law, hustling on the side, a reputation for having a short fuse. But when he smiled, when he spoke to her like she was the only woman in the world, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, he could change. At first, it was the kind of love that consumed her. Late-night drives, deep conversations, whispered promises of a future where neither of them would have to struggle. Jevonte swore he wanted more than the streets, that he was ready to leave the hustling life behind and build something real with her. And Taniyah wanted so badly to believe him. But love wasn't enough to erase who Jevonte really was. Their fights started small. Petty arguments over money, over the way she talked to him, over who she was texting. Jevonte didn't like feeling disrespected, and his definition of disrespect seemed to change by the day. One night, he accused her of dressing too provocatively, of trying to get attention from other men. Another night, it was a problem that she worked late, like she was trying to avoid him on purpose. The tension between them grew, but every time she thought about walking away, he pulled her back in with apologies, with gifts, with promises that things would be different. Their friends and family saw the warning signs. Taniyah's best friend, Kyra, told her more than once that she needed to leave. "Girl, that man got a temper. One day, it's gonna be too late." But Taniyah always had an excuse. "He's just stressed. He's trying to do better. He loves me." And then there were the good days, the days when he was the Jevonte she had fallen in love with. The father figure her kids needed. The man who could make her laugh even when she felt like crying. Social media saw those moments. The smiling selfies, the birthday surprises, the declarations of love. No one saw the way he punched the wall when she upset him. No one saw the way he yanked her phone out of her hand to check her messages. No one saw the bruises she covered with makeup and the lies she told to explain them away. Taniyah wanted to believe in change. But deep down, she knew the truth: love alone wasn't enough to fix a man like Jevonte Maddox. And one day, his anger would be more than just words. One day, he wouldn't just punch the wall. One day, he'd turn that rage on her. Jevonte Maddox grew up knowing only one way to survive: through dominance. Raised in a home where love was conditional and violence was the only currency, he learned early that control meant security. His mother cycled through abusive boyfriends, each one leaving scars, physical and emotional, on both her and her children. His father, long gone, was nothing more than a cautionary tale whispered about in hushed voices. By the time Jevonte was a teenager, he had already developed a hardened exterior, masking his insecurities with aggression. Trouble followed him like a shadow. He started with small-time hustling, stealing, dealing, anything to assert his presence in a world that constantly tried to break him. His rap sheet was a collection of bad decisions and unchecked rage, assault charges that were mysteriously dropped, drug possession that never stuck. The system seemed to give him just enough rope to keep hanging himself, but Jevonte always found a way to slip free. Each escape from consequence only fed his sense of invincibility. When he met Taniyah, he saw something he wasn't used to, genuine warmth. She had a light about her, a quiet strength that he both admired and feared. At first, he adored her, showering her with attention, making her feel like the center of his universe. But deep down, a part of him resented her ability to see the good in the world. Her optimism was a threat to the darkness he had grown so comfortable in. As time passed, that admiration turned into possessiveness. He watched the way men looked at her, the way she laughed a little too freely at their jokes. Every smile that wasn't meant for him chipped away at his pride. He began questioning her every move, where she was going, who she was talking to, why she wasn't picking up her phone fast enough. At first, it was subtle. A comment here, a disapproving look there. But soon, his need for control overtook any pretense of love. Taniyah started walking on eggshells, anticipating his moods, trying to keep the peace. But peace was never enough for Jevonte. He wanted obedience. If she posted a picture he didn't approve of, there was a fight. If she took too long to respond to a text, accusations flew. His jealousy, once masked as concern, now bared its teeth as outright threats. And when she pushed back, reminding him she had dreams of her own, his rage ignited. "Ain't nobody gonna love you like I do," he would sneer, his words more warning than reassurance. "You think them other dudes care? They just want a hit. I'm the only one who got your back." But love wasn't supposed to feel like a cage. The tighter Jevonte held on, the more Taniyah struggled to breathe. She started pulling away, spending more time at work, talking about school again, imagining a life where she wasn't constantly looking over her shoulder. And Jevonte saw it happening. He saw the shift, the way she was slipping through his fingers. The more independent she became, the more desperate he grew. He didn't know how to love without control. He didn't know how to be vulnerable without turning to violence. And so, the cycle continued. Every argument ended the same, Taniyah in tears, Jevonte storming out, only to return later with hollow apologies and empty promises. "I ain't mean that, baby," he would murmur, pulling her close, his voice soft but his grip firm. "You just make me crazy sometimes. You know I love you." And for a moment, she would believe him. But deep down, she knew love wasn't supposed to feel like this. And Jevonte? He knew she was slipping away. But he would rather destroy her than let her go. The night of March 17, 2024, was supposed to be uneventful. Taniyah Willis had spent the evening helping her children with their homework, preparing them for bed, and scrolling through job postings on her phone. She was exhausted but hopeful, clinging to the belief that better days were ahead. Then came the knock at the door. Jevonte Maddox wasn't supposed to be there. She had told him earlier that week that she needed space, that their relationship wasn't working. But Jevonte never respected boundaries. He arrived unannounced, the stench of liquor and cheap weed clinging to him like a second skin. His pupils were dilated, his hands twitching at his sides. "Who the fuck you been talking to?" he slurred as soon as she opened the door. Taniyah sighed, already tired of the fight before it even began. "Jevonte, I told you I'm done with this. Go home." "Home?" He let out a bitter laugh, stepping inside and shutting the door behind him. "I am home, Taniyah. You my home. Or did you forget?" His voice was laced with something dangerous, something she had heard too many times before. It was the voice he used before his temper boiled over, before things got out of control. She instinctively took a step back, putting space between them. "I don't want to do this tonight," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "But you want to do it with other niggas, huh?" His expression twisted with rage. "You out here trying to play me, make me look stupid?" Taniyah shook her head. "Jevonte, you're drunk. Go sleep that shit off." He took a step closer, his breath hot and rank with alcohol. "Don't tell me what the fuck to do. You think you better than me, bitch. You ugly as hell. Ain't no man want you. Taniyah had spent years letting his words cut into her, but something inside her snapped. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the realization that he would never change. Maybe it was knowing her kids were asleep just down the hall and that they deserved a life without this cycle of violence. Then why you still here? She shot back, her voice firm. Weak-ass nigga. Jevonte froze. His nostrils flared. The room was thick with unspoken threats, with years of unresolved pain and anger. And then he reached for his waistband. The gun came out in a flash, the dull gleam of the metal catching the light from the hallway. Taniyah barely had time to react before the first shot rang out, the bullet tearing into her shoulder. She stumbled back, her mouth opening in a silent scream as pain exploded through her body. The second shot came before she could regain her footing, hitting her square in the chest. She fell to the floor, gasping, her body convulsing as warm blood pooled beneath her. Her children woke up to the sound of their mother's agony. They ran to the living room, their small feet padding against the wooden floor. They stood frozen, watching in horror as Jevonte stood over their mother, his chest rising and falling with ragged breaths. Taniyah, her vision blurring, turned her head slightly, her last desperate attempt to shield them from what came next. The third and final shot silenced her forever. The bullet ripped through her face, ending whatever dreams she still held on to. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then the children's screams filled the apartment, a sound so raw and heart-wrenching that even Jevonte flinched. Reality crashed down on him all at once. The blood, the lifeless body, the wide, terrified eyes of the children he had just orphaned. "Fuck," he whispered, his hands shaking. "Fuck." Then he bolted. The front door slammed behind him, and he disappeared into the night, leaving behind nothing but a trail of destruction and two children who would never forget the last moments of their mother's life. He had to get out. He could hear the muffled sound of neighbors shouting, the shuffle of feet on the stairwell. Someone had already called the police. The sirens weren't far off. He bolted, pushing past the front door, his shoes slick with blood as he stumbled into the night. Outside, chaos erupted. The apartment complex was alive with people, residents peering out their doors, some stepping onto their balconies. "Freeze! Hands where we can see them," a voice bellowed. Jevonte barely had time to react before a heavy force slammed into his back, knocking him face first into the pavement. Rough hands wrenched his arms behind him, cold steel cuffs biting into his wrists. He struggled, twisting against the officers, but there was no escaping now. The weight of what he had done finally set in. As they hauled him to his feet, he muttered, voice hoarse, "She pushed me. She pushed me too far." The officers didn't respond. They stuffed him into the back of a squad car as the cries of his children echoed through the night. His face was pressed against the window, giving him one last view of the apartment complex, of the flashing lights, of the paramedics rushing inside, of the crowd whispering, watching. His world had ended, and there was no going back now. The news of Taniyah Willis's brutal murder spread like wildfire. Within hours, local headlines detailed the horrific crime: mother of two gunned down in front of her children, father arrested. As the story gained traction, national media picked it up, dissecting every detail of the tragedy. The gruesome nature of the crime, the heartbreaking image of two young children witnessing their mother's execution, and the chilling history of domestic violence between Taniyah and Jevonte sparked outrage and debate across the country. Social media erupted with a storm of opinions. Hashtags like #JusticeForTaniyah and #EndDomesticViolence trended overnight. People shared photos of her, smiling with her children, painting the picture of a loving mother who never deserved such a fate. Others, however, took a different stance. Some questioned whether Taniyah had provoked Jevonte, whether her defiance had pushed him to his breaking point. Comments flooded in under news articles and viral posts. "Men don't just snap," one person wrote. This was years of built-up rage. "She should have left him for good." Another countered, "It doesn't matter what she said,
he had no right to take her life. Now those babies have no mother. Neighbors and close friends began speaking out. One woman who lived in the same apartment complex recalled the countless nights she had heard shouting, the times she had seen Taniyah with swollen eyes and bruised arms. "We all knew something like this would happen eventually. She was trying to leave him, but he wasn't going to let her go." Another friend provided damning evidence, a series of voice messages Taniyah had sent just weeks before her death. In one, her voice trembled as she spoke. "I'm scared of him, but I can't keep living like this. I don't want my babies growing up thinking this is normal." The recordings painted a clear picture of a woman trapped in a cycle of fear and manipulation, making the tragedy feel even more inevitable. Domestic violence experts weighed in on the case, explaining the patterns of abuse and the tragic reality that many women face when trying to leave toxic relationships. "People always ask why victims stay," one advocate stated in an interview. "But when your abuser controls your finances, your emotions, and threatens your safety, walking away isn't as easy as it seems. And for many, leaving is the most dangerous time." While some saw Jevonte as nothing more than a remorseless killer, others argued that he was a product of his environment. Raised in a home where violence was the norm, abandoned by the system, and struggling with untreated anger issues, his supporters claimed he never had a real chance at a different life. "What he did was horrific, no doubt," one commenter wrote. "But this is the result of generations of trauma. Until we address the root cause, this won't be the last tragedy like this." The case became a catalyst for a larger conversation about domestic violence, toxic relationships, and the failure of society to intervene before it's too late. Protests erupted, demanding harsher penalties for abusers and better resources for victims. Candlelight vigils were held in Taniyah's honor, her children's faces burned into the minds of those who mourned the loss of a young mother who had fought so hard to escape, only to be silenced forever. As Jevonte sat in a jail cell, the world continued to dissect his actions. Was he a heartless murderer or a broken man who let his demons consume him? The debate raged on, but one fact remained: Taniyah Willis was gone, and 2 innocent children would never be the same again. The courtroom was silent as the jury returned after deliberating for less than 3 hours. Jevonte Maddox sat slumped in his chair, his face a mixture of defiance and regret, as the judge prepared to read the verdict. Taniyah's family sat in the front row, holding each other, some with tears streaming down their faces, others gripped in quiet rage. Her mother, who had been her closest ally in the struggle to escape the chaos of her relationship, stared at the man who had killed her daughter with a burning intensity. The prosecutor's words echoed through the room as he described Jevonte's actions as a deliberate execution. Jevonte Maddox, a man who had the opportunity to walk away, chose instead to take his partner's life. He shot her in front of their children, without a moment's hesitation, ending her life with ruthless violence. The prosecution painted him as a man consumed by his own insecurities, a man who had long used control, manipulation, and violence to maintain power in his relationship with Taniyah. Jevonte's defense, however, tried to humanize him. His lawyer claimed that Jevonte had never intended to kill Taniyah, suggesting his actions were the result of a combination of intoxication and emotional instability. The defense emphasized that Jevonte's childhood, filled with abuse and neglect, had shaped his view of the world, making it difficult for him to control his temper. This was not a calculated act, but one of impulsive rage, the lawyer pleaded, hoping to sway the jury with the idea that Jevonte was a product of a broken system. Despite the defense's arguments, the jury quickly reached a unanimous decision. The verdict came down as a thunderous weight, guilty of first-degree murder. Taniyah's family, while relieved that justice had been served, were not comforted. No verdict could bring Taniyah back. No punishment could erase the image of her children witnessing the murder of their mother. The judge was solemn as he passed sentence, his voice firm. "Jevonte Maddox, you will serve life in prison without the possibility of parole. Your actions have taken an innocent life and irrevocably damaged the lives of your children. You will never be allowed to walk free again." The courtroom seemed to breathe collectively as the gavel came down, the finality of the sentence echoing like a tolling bell. For Taniyah's mother, the verdict was bittersweet. She had won the fight to gain custody of her grandchildren, but the trauma they had endured would never fade. The children, once full of energy and joy, were now shell-shocked, quiet, and withdrawn. The images of that night would forever haunt them, their mother's screams, the gunshots, the blood. They had witnessed their mother's death, and no child should ever bear such a burden. As Taniyah's mother, along with other family members, prepared to take on the responsibility of raising two young children left motherless, the community responded in shock and sorrow. Neighbors who had witnessed the escalating violence between Taniyah and Jevonte began to speak out, expressing regret for not doing more to intervene. Many of them had heard the screams, seen the bruises on Taniyah's body, and yet had never called the police or offered more than a passing glance of concern. The tragedy sparked a wider conversation about the danger of domestic violence. People in the community rallied to support Taniyah's family, offering assistance with the children and organizing awareness campaigns about domestic abuse. There was a collective outcry over the way society had turned a blind eye to Taniyah's suffering, and many vowed to work harder to protect those in abusive relationships before it was too late. Taniyah's death became a symbol for a movement against domestic violence, a reminder that no one should have to fear for their life in their own home. The community held vigils in her honor, and her story made headlines across the nation, sparking discussions about the importance of providing resources and support for women in abusive relationships. Though Taniyah was gone, her legacy lived on in the faces of those who fought for change in her name. In prison, Jevonte's reality was harsh. The life sentence meant no possibility of freedom, no second chances. In the quiet moments of his confinement, he had little else to do but reflect on the life he had ruined, not just by taking Taniyah's life but by the years of violence and manipulation that had led to that fateful night. His pride and his desire for control had destroyed everything he once cared for. He would spend the rest of his life behind bars, his face forever linked to a crime that no apology could ever undo. Taniyah's children, though young, were slowly learning to cope with their trauma. Therapy and counseling became a part of their new reality, and with the support of their grandmother, they began to rebuild their lives. But the scars, emotional and psychological, remained. As time passed, the community continued to mourn the loss of Taniyah, but they also grew determined to prevent similar tragedies. The outcry for reform in domestic violence laws and better support systems for victims was stronger than ever. Taniyah's story became a rallying cry for those who had suffered in silence, and for the children who had been forced to witness their mother's brutal death. The fight for justice was just beginning. Taniyah's death had shattered her family, but it had also ignited a spark that promised to bring about change for others who had yet to escape the deadly grip of domestic violence. The search for justice had not only been a legal battle but also a moral one, urging society to confront the uncomfortable truths about abuse, power, and control, and to do more to protect the vulnerable before it was too late. This case is a devastating reminder of the dangers of unchecked rage, the consequences of control disguised as love, and the innocent lives left shattered in its wake. Jevonte and Taniyah's story is one of passion turned poison, a tragic illustration of how quickly love can become lethal. Their relationship, once filled with the spark of romance, spiraled into a nightmare fueled by jealousy, insecurity, and violent control. In the end, it was not just Taniyah who lost her life, but also the future of her children, who were forced to witness a horrific act of violence at the hands of their father. Could this tragedy have been avoided? Was there something that could have stopped the cycle of abuse before it reached its deadly climax? Taniyah had tried to escape, tried to stand up for herself, but the grip of manipulation and fear held her in place far too long. The question remains, how do we break the cycle? How do we protect those who feel trapped in relationships where love is twisted into something toxic and dangerous? These are questions that need to be asked, not just in the aftermath of tragedy, but before it ever starts. If this story shocked you, like and subscribe for more cases that explore the darkest intersections of love, lies, and betrayal. This story, like so many others, should never be forgotten. And perhaps, by sharing these stories, we can work together to prevent the next one.